So, Cathie, I really was excited to talk to you because I've been thinking a lot about the future. Um, and this series
You
that we're
have
doing
three
is
children.
I have three
You have three
children. Well,
children.
right. So you think about the future for three children. I think about the future, well, for a bunch of reasons. I'm a journalist, and I've been thinking about the way that I've been thinking a lot about how we conceive of the future in a cultural sense. Utopian visions versus dystopian visions. I think we're in a very like dystopian dominant moment in sort of
Absolutely.
culturally, which I think
Uh-huh.
makes a lot of sense. But I think about the future. The future is a dangerous thing to write about if you're a journalist because it's unwritten. But you're what you do is think about the future and then make bets on the future. You have to you have to kind of put your money where your ideas are about the future. And
Absolutely.
I'm curious, maybe broadly, what where you're thinking about where the future is going right now in a broad sense, and then we can break those out a little bit into which technologies, which innovations are going to drive that.
Yes, in a broad sense, we have never been like this moment in history in terms of the amount of change that is about to, it's already started. We feel the ground, as you just said, shifting underneath us. It has already started. Five major innovation platforms evolving at the same time. You have to go back to the early 1900s to see anything like it. You had three platforms then. You had telephone, electricity, and automobile. Today you have DNA sequencing. You heard it on the conference, DNA sequencing, robotics, energy storage, artificial intelligence, blockchain technologies. All of them are in exponential growth trajectories, and they are converging with one another in massively important ways and profound ways. And they're going to deliver, we believe, if you just take a look at the technologies themselves, over the next 10 years, we believe the market cap associated with these five platforms and the 14 underlying technologies is going to scale at a 30% compound annual rate of return. These are astonishing rates of return. And if you're a good stock picker, you'll probably do even better than that if you're focused only on innovation.
So what's interesting about these five categories when you lay them out is that they transcend atoms and bits. And that's been a place where there's been a really interesting question about innovation, right? Because we've had tremendous innovation on the digital side.
Mm-hmm.
No one would really argue against that, right? Like
Yes.
we're all holding a computer that's more powerful than the one that sent a human to the moon, at all times. So all of the stuff that we've seen with Moore's law and all the stuff we've seen on the bit side has kind of gone along what very bullish predictions might have said. On the atom side, it's been a much different story. I mean, particularly when you look about the fact that like most people are using a combustion engine to get around. That's fundamentally not that different from the technology of 100 years ago, Mercedes-Benz in the 19th
Absolutely.
century. That has been the place where it felt like we've had some real innovation roadblocks, that the
Yes.
physical structure that powers the world, the extraction of fossil fuel, the burning it in combustion engines, the burning it in plants, has not changed that much. And what you're saying is that that is going to change now.
It is going to change for two reasons beyond the environmental concerns. One, the technologies are ready. The kind of battery technology, artificial intelligence, and robotics. Those three, actually, that's a convergence taking place in the transportation field. Whether you're talking about autonomous vehicles, ultimately, or drones for parcels or food delivery and so forth. So yes, you're absolutely right. These worlds are the digital and the physical world finally are converging because the technology is ready. And just as important, the costs are low enough. The costs were prohibitively high before, especially when it came to electric vehicle sort of battery technology. But thanks to Elon Musk, and I would say also to the Chinese, who are moving very quickly in this direction, that is no longer true. In fact, the total cost of ownership of an electric vehicle, most people don't know this, is lower today than that for a gas powered vehicle. Most people just look at the sticker price, and
Yep.
we think in 2 years that they will be the same price. And then a few years after that, we believe that electric vehicles will be 30% plus lower in price. So these cost declines continue in emerging technologies, whereas the internal combustion engine is a very mature technology. So it is not enjoying any more cost declines. They ended a long time ago.
Yeah. Is there? I mean, one thing that we've seen. So if you look at PV cells, right? We've seen this incredible cost decline of solar, both residential and at large sort of commercial or industrial scale. And but we haven't necessarily. I mean, there's this question about whether that's been associated with profit and returns in those industries, because we've seen a very competitive and sometimes very low margin drive in for instance PVs, because you've got a lot of players in the market. You've got China, making them very, very cheaply. And so you've had a sort of a little bit of a strange situation in which, from the consumer standpoint, from the deployment standpoint, you're getting this incredible cost plummet, but that's not necessarily converting to huge returns to the people that are players or investors in that sector.
Right. That's a very commoditized industry. And
Yeah.
I remember when China made a decision that this was one of its goals to dominate that sector, that's when the commoditization began. But there's another thing, and I think what will change the picture are solar roofs, like Tesla has designed. And the reason we think that's going to proliferate solar over time in a more comprehensive way is because the roof will be part of the house. That's how it'll be financed instead of consumer installment debt and
Right.
cold calling and so forth. So it will just become a part of our residential infrastructure, and it will become a part of our mortgage. So it'll be a very different adoption cycle than we think that we've seen thus far.
Right, because it's path dependent. It's built in. I mean, the same way that you buy a house and it has a bunch of features like how it's heated and how the water's heated. All of that's built into the house. You buy it, you get an inspector. Obviously, those things can break down. You can replace them, but the default starting point for any home, right, is that you got something to heat the water. You don't buy a home and then have to figure out how you're going to go do that, which is what still is the reality in the residential space around energy, around electricity.
Right, right. And we can add another wrinkle here, part of our research, which we talked about during the conference, which is, with the way the electrical grid is evolving, we could see Bitcoin mining become a part of that infrastructure, so that here in St. Petersburg, for example, we fill up our energy storage units quite easily because it's so sunny here. The overflow could go to Bitcoin mining, which would accelerate the shift towards renewables, because the whole ecosystem will become so much more profitable over time.
Right. I mean, there's obviously an enormous concern about energy intensivity of Bitcoin and crypto coin mining. Obviously, if you're a miner, you want to go to the place where you've got the cheapest energy. And in some cases, you can imagine a universe of camped out in Arizona with, free solar coming. But in a lot of places, it's people getting very cheap energy through fossil fuels and coal. And that seems unsustainable in the long run, both at the cost level and obviously from the carbon pollution standpoint. How feasible do you see the conversion to, there's the proof of stake question about whether we're going to get there and how quickly we're going to get there to reduce energy intensivity, but also to find ways that we're not, using a bunch of coal to make Bitcoin, which just seems like psychotically suicidal from a planetary standpoint.
Well, I think China banning mining was very helpful in that regard.
Yes.
And so the US was the biggest beneficiary of that. I think 34 or 5% of the mining now is taking place here in the United States. And Kazakhstan also. So we're seeing people like Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey, who both care an awful lot about the environment, trying to figure this problem out. And in fact, what I just mentioned about Bitcoin becoming a part of Bitcoin mining, becoming a part of a utility ecosystem, came out of research that we at ARC had done, led by Brett Winton, our director of research, and Yassine Elmandra, who's our lead crypto analyst. Working with Square, we were able to dimension how much the solar and wind would proliferate, how much faster it would proliferate with Bitcoin mining as a part of the ecosystem, as opposed to without it. And I think that research is starting to bear fruit. We're seeing utility ecosystems. They're getting the plot, and they're looking for new ways to profit. And in the meantime, or in the process, they will be accelerating the shift towards renewables. Ironically, given the way people talk about Bitcoin.
What is when you talk about AI? I think when I talk about these sort of zeitgeist moods of utopia, dystopia, that AI tends to be a source of a lot of dystopian angst, and I don't think baselessly. There's lots of reasons. There's really lots of reasons to be worried. There's a sort of long speculative line. There's a very interesting line of philosophical inquisition into this. What's your case for, utopian or positive outcomes that avoid the kind of worst anxieties people have about the proliferation of AI technology?
Yes, well, first, let's start by agreeing that a lot of people are worried. And I think that's good news. Half of the solution is understanding the problem. And I think the reason we're understanding the problem maybe a little faster than would otherwise have been the case, and understanding it more broadly, is because China wants to win at this game. And they are moving up the league tables in terms of semiconductor chip manufacturing, focusing on AI. Just generally, from our point of view, and what we seek to encourage is innovation that solves problems and makes the world a better place. Typically, that is what it does. Now, is technology used for nefarious purposes? All the time, all the time. And having cybersecurity experts out there focused on this, having the government really focused on this, I think is good news. Is good news. But in terms of solving the world's problems, we see AI converging with each of the platforms, including blockchain technology. We see it critical to autonomous taxi systems and drones, which are going to lower the cost of transportation and make it much more convenient than it is right now, and much safer, much safer. We see it in the genomics space, the convergence of DNA sequencing and artificial intelligence and gene editing and other gene therapies, the convergence of those actually curing disease. We now have functional cures for sickle cell disease, beta thalassemia, and a rare disease called ATTR. And that latest one was an Intellia gene editing solution that was done in the body, not done by pulling cells out of the body. We are curing disease. Could not happen without artificial intelligence. And in the case of blockchain technology, I think we're going to see we're already seeing some very interesting convergences between blockchain technology and asset management in the form of hedge funds that employ data scientists to try and beat all the averages out there. So I don't think we'll be able to get away from artificial intelligence. I think we need to get on the right side of change here, make sure that we've got the right experts focused on the potential problems, but then run with the solutions that it offers.
Let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin and crypto more broadly, and Web3 platforms. I mean, to me, this is something that you can't walk around in the world anymore and not bump into it. I think I was resistant for a while to sort of embedding myself and understanding it. I now have done that and feel like I have a little bit of a better grasp. So the one big question for me is the sort of distinction between the blockchain and Web3 infrastructure as a broadly applicable tool to build what is essentially the next version of the internet atop from the coin space. And those two are very enmeshed in a sort of cultural, institutional sense right now. Obviously, the technologies are related to each other at the point of conception, But what is your case for how those two develop and the degree which they develop independently, such that the blockchain and Web3 platforms can be something that is much more ubiquitously used outside of the coin space?
Sure. Well, in Big Ideas, we describe this by using the term revolutions. There are three revolutions taking place simultaneously right now. One is a money revolution. One is a financial services revolution. And one is a next generation internet revolution.
Right.
So on the money revolution, Bitcoin and Ether to some extent, but Bitcoin, surely, it is the most secure network out there, is the first, and each one of these words is really important. The first global, private, decentralized monetary system ever invented. And it is going to have profound ramifications. Just ask the people in El Salvador. And recently, President Bukele of El Salvador had a conversation with President Erdogan of Turkey because they are going through a currency crisis. And so I think the emerging markets are going to adopt this kind of monetary system increasingly because their own monetary systems, very dependent often on the dollar or on the euro or someone else who does not control the population. They would prefer not to be dependent on politicians. This doesn't involve politicians. So that's the monetary revolution. And we think that it's going to proliferate faster. Emerging markets are very interested. Except for China, of course. They're interested in making the digital yuan right. the reserve currency of Asia. And that's fully controlled by people. What I'm discussing is not. The second revolution is in the financial services industry. We do believe that DeFi, decentralized finance, is going to usurp the role of most financial services companies today. Most financial services companies are middlemen. And DeFi takes the middlemen out of the equation. You know, in the early days, some of your viewers may know of Lending Club, and it took some middlemen out of the equation. Was able to offer higher rates to savers and lower rates to borrowers, and became very, very popular very quickly. Well, put that on steroids. That's what we have going on in DeFi. And again, it's a global movement. All of these are global. They are not. They're not being governed by any particular nationality. Now, regulators are now turning their sights on DeFi pretty aggressively. You saw in the chart how at least once a month, twice a month, in the last year, a regulator somewhere around the world has said, "Hey, we've got to investigate this," and that's not a bad thing. I think in the United States, my observation is that regulators want to protect the little guy, the average investor. That's their mandate, and that's good. Prevent frauds and other such things. And yet I also found regulators not wanting to be blamed for preventing, at least here in the US, from participating in the next big thing, the next big internet. We have an ethos of innovation in this country. Interestingly, even though it seems today that investors are running away from it, it's kind of the opposite of the tech and telecom bubble when they were falling all over themselves. That was a dream. This is the reality, and they're running away. But regulators want to encourage innovation. So I think putting guardrails around is going to be a good thing for everyone. So that's the second. And I don't mean just saving and lending. I mean the full spectrum of financial services, almost anything out there. And then the third revolution is the next generation internet revolution. And that it does include NFTs. And the way we like to describe NFTs is, again, first, global, another big word, private, rules-based property rights system. So scarce and verifiable. Now, anyone who has read economic history knows the key to lifting countries and people out of poverty is to put in place a property rights system that is secure and verifiable and protected. So we think this is a very big idea. A lot of people think the benefits will accrue to the creator community. We love that idea, the creator community, and it isn't just art, right? And gaming, and it's music. We're going to find out how creative people are as the NFT revolution evolves.